Get out of here. This gala isn't for people like you." The words cracked through the White House ballroom like a whip. Heads turned, champagne glasses froze midair, and the string quartet faltered into silence. At the center of the storm stood Elise Carter, tall, poised, radiant in a sleek black gown. She didn't flinch. She didn't defend herself. She simply stood as if rooted into the marble floor, watching the insult hang heavy in the air. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elise Carter. She had walked into the East Wing ballroom without fanfare. No jewelry shouting wealth, no entourage clearing a path. Just quiet confidence wrapped in elegance, a woman blending into the glittering crowd of senators, lobbyists, and billionaires. And yet, the moment she stepped near the dais, whispers swirled. Who was she? How did she get in? A black woman alone in a sea of white-tie power. To some, that alone was offense enough. The insult came from Margaret Whitfield, wife of an oil magnate and longtime political donor. 60 years old, draped in pearls, she wielded her privilege like a weapon sharpened over decades. "You don't belong here," she hissed, her voice loud enough to echo off the vaulted ceilings. Then, with theatrical cruelty, she waved her hand at the guards. "Escort her out." Gasps rippled across the room. Phones appeared, their lenses catching the spectacle. A young journalist near the press table whispered, "Is anyone else seeing this?" before hitting record on a live stream. In the corner, a congressional aide froze, torn between stepping in or watching history write itself. Elise didn't move. She didn't break. Her arms crossed lightly, her chin lifted. The silence became unbearable for everyone but her. The longer she said nothing, the sharper the tension cut. People shifted uneasily, some glancing at one another as if to confirm. Had they just heard what they thought they heard? Margaret pressed forward, her voice dripping contempt. "This is the White House, not some charity banquet. You think you can just waltz in here?" Her words carried the sting of certainty, the arrogance of someone convinced the room belonged to her kind alone. The guard nearest Elise hesitated, a hand brushing her shoulder. Every camera caught the moment, the touch that turned insult into spectacle. Elise's eyes flicked to him calm, steady, a look that stopped him from pressing further. She remained still, every ounce of her restraint radiating more power than anger ever could. In that moment, memories flickered across her mind. At 22, she had been told she was too ambitious to sit at a boardroom table. At 30, mistaken for the assistant in a company she already owned. Again and again, the same script played out. Disbelief that a black woman could hold power without explanation. And tonight, beneath the chandeliers of the White House, the script returned, but Elise was no longer 22, no longer 30. She was a billionaire CEO, the single largest donor to the campaign they were toasting. Guests shifted. A senator's wife whispered, "Isn't that Elise Carter?" But her voice was swallowed by the hum of scandal. Margaret smirked, certain she still held control. "Take her out. Now." But Elise only stood taller, her silence turning the insult into a spotlight, forcing every witness to choose. Would they side with arrogance, or wait to see who this woman truly was? The gala had begun as a celebration of power. It was about to become a courtroom. The guard's hand lingered on Elise's shoulder, the weight of authority pressing against her calm. The ballroom had turned into a stage, and everyone knew it. Pearls clinked against crystal as whispers rippled through the crowd. Margaret Whitfield's smirk widened, feeding off the silence. "Do you see?" she sneered to the guests nearest her. "They let anyone in these days. The standards are gone." Her voice cut sharp, designed to humiliate not just Elise, but anyone who looked like her. A senator's aide shifted uncomfortably, his phone tilted just low enough to capture video without drawing notice. A young journalist, pressed against the back wall, whispered into his mic, "We are live at the White House Gala, and something's happening here. This doesn't look right." Thousands of viewers poured into the stream in seconds. Elise still hadn't spoken. She stood taller now, chin lifted, eyes steady, the picture of restraint. Every second she held her silence made Margaret's cruelty louder. The strings of the quartet had gone still. Waiters froze in their tracks, trays hovering midair. Even the chandeliers seemed to pulse with the tension. Margaret leaned in closer, pearls grazing her collarbone, eyes flashing. I don't care what name you dropped at the door. You don't belong in this room. This is power, not charity. The words stung the air like acid. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some stared at Elise with suspicion, others with pity, and a few, very few, watched with dawning recognition. From the press pit, a young reporter mouthed to her colleague, "Isn't that Carter? Elise Carter?" The colleague shrugged, eyes locked on his camera lens. If it is, this just became a story of the year. The guard tightened his stance, hand edging closer to Elise's arm as if ready to drag her out. "Ma'am, we're going to have to escort you," he said, voice low, rehearsed, impersonal. Elise turned her head slightly, her gaze cutting into him, not sharp, not loud, but enough to make his hand tremble. She still said nothing. Her silence carried more weight than a protest ever could. Across the room, a lobbyist muttered under his breath, "Why are they doing this?" She hasn't said a word. His companion whispered back, "It's because she doesn't look the part." That phrase, "doesn't look the part," hung heavy, familiar, an echo of generations. Margaret, emboldened by the room's unease, straightened her spine and raised her voice so even the furthest table would hear. "You think your little dress and cheap manners make you one of us? You're embarrassing yourself." Laughter bubbled from one corner table, a cruel chorus of validation. But not everyone was laughing. A young intern in the corner clenched her jaw, phone in hand, whispering, "This is wrong. This is all wrong." She lifted her device, red light blinking. The live stream audience doubled, then tripled. Comments flooded in. "Who is she? Why are they throwing her out? This feels racist as hell." Still, Elise did not answer. She had weathered this script before at 22, denied a seat in a boardroom because her voice didn't sound seasoned enough. At 30, mistaken for the secretary in a firm she had already acquired. Now, beneath the chandeliers of America's most guarded ballroom, the script replayed itself. But tonight, she was ready to turn silence into a blade. The guard's grip steadied. Margaret snapped, "Now, remove her." The command cracked like a gavel. The room held its breath. Elise remained still, anchored, waiting. Every camera was rolling. Every guest was watching. The humiliation was reaching its peak, and no one knew the storm about to break. The command echoed like a verdict. "Remove her!" The guard shifted forward, broad shoulders tense, his hand brushing Elise's arm again. Every eye in the East Wing was fixed on the tableau, the billionaire's wife, brimming with arrogance. The black woman in the black gown, standing in still defiance. The silence was thick enough to crack. Then it happened. A voice from the press section cut through the ballroom. "Wait, I know her." Heads whipped toward the sound. A young journalist, badge swinging at her chest, stood with her phone high. Her live stream was climbing into the tens of thousands. "That's Elise Carter," she said, voice firm. "CEO, philanthropist, billionaire." Gasps erupted. Some guests turned pale. Others frowned, unwilling to believe. Margaret's laugh sliced through the noise. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Do you really think someone like her has billions to her name?" The venom in the word "her" was unmistakable. The journalist didn't back down. She rotated her screen to show Elise's image side by side with a Forbes profile page. "You're humiliating one of the largest donors to this very campaign." The crowd shifted. Murmurs grew into sharp whispers. A senator leaned to his aide. "If that's true, we're finished." His aide only nodded, eyes wide. Elise still hadn't spoken. Her composure made the insult sharper, the tension unbearable. The guard hesitated now, caught between an order and the possibility of the biggest mistake of his career. His grip loosened. His eyes flicked to Margaret, waiting for clarity that never came. Margaret's face flushed. "This is nonsense. She's an imposter, some con artist in a rented gown. Look at her." She gestured wildly, as if Elise's skin, her silence, her presence could serve as proof of guilt. From a corner table, a congressman's wife muttered, "I've seen her before, at the Carter Foundation Gala in New York." The confirmation spread like a spark across dry leaves. Suddenly, the whispers weren't questions, they were recognition. A young intern, phone shaking in her hand, raised her voice. "She belongs here more than any of us." It wasn't loud, but it pierced the hush. Others nodded. Some clapped softly. The balance of the room was tilting. Margaret felt it slipping. Desperation sharpened her tone. "Security, do your job. Remove this woman before she embarrasses us all." But the guard didn't move. His hand dropped to his side. He had seen enough. The journalist's live stream ticked past 100,000 viewers. Comments flashed. "She's the donor. This is racism in real time. Stay strong, Elise." And still Elise stood in silence, her eyes steady, her arms folded lightly across her chest. She was letting the room reveal itself, exposing every smirk, every whisper, every assumption. The humiliation no longer belonged to her, it belonged to them. Margaret's voice cracked now, thinner, frantic. "Why won't you leave? Why won't you say something?" Finally, Elise's lips parted. Her voice was low, calm, razor sharp. "Because I don't owe you my defense. Every second you speak, you convict yourself." The ballroom froze. The music hadn't returned. The clinking glasses were gone. Only her words remained, hanging like judgment in the air. And for the first time that night, Margaret Whitfield had no reply. The hush after Elise's words spread like a tremor, rolling through the White House ballroom. Guests glanced at one another, some ashamed, some riveted, all caught in the undertow of a moment they knew would outlive the evening. The guard, now fully withdrawn, stepped back 2 paces, his hand hovering nowhere near her. He wasn't about to become the face of this scandal. Margaret Whitfield, however, refused to let go. Her pearls trembled against her collarbone as she raised her voice, brittle but loud. "This is outrageous. She's manipulating you all. A woman like her standing there in silence? It's an act. Don't you see it?" Her eyes darted, desperate, searching for support. But the tide had shifted. The room no longer hummed with agreement. It bristled with doubt. At the press table, another journalist stood, adjusting her glasses. "I covered her foundation's healthcare initiative last year. That's Elise Carter. I'd stake my career on it." She pointed toward Elise, her voice unwavering. "She's no imposter." Phones rose higher now, dozens of red lights blinking like a constellation. Live streams spread to every corner of the internet, captions flying. "White House donor insulted at Gala. Wife of billionaire confronts black CEO." This is what bias looks like in real time. Elise finally moved, not rushed, not flustered. A single step forward, deliberate, as though she were anchoring herself deeper into the marble floor. She turned her gaze toward Margaret, voice still calm. "You wanted me small. You wanted me silent. But I am neither. I don't raise my voice because my presence is enough." The words landed like iron. A young staffer near the podium whispered, "She's owning the room." Another murmured back, "No, she already owned it when she walked in." Margaret's face flushed red. "Security, this is your final warning," she shrieked. "Do your job." But the guard didn't move. His jaw clenched, eyes lowered, his silence spoke volumes. Then, from the far side of the room, a senator in a navy suit stood. He cleared his throat, his voice measured but strong. "Mrs. Whitfield, enough. You are humiliating not just her, but all of us." The gasps that followed were different now, not shock at Elise, but at the audacity of Margaret. Elise's memory flickered again 20 years earlier, a hotel lobby in Charlotte. 16 years old, dressed in her Sunday best, told the lounge was for guests only. She had waited on the sidewalk in shame while others sipped tea inside. That sting had lived in her bones for decades. And here it was again, at the height of her power, recycled in pearls and prejudice. Her eyes sharpened. "You've mistaken my patience for weakness. That is your last mistake." The line sliced through the ballroom like glass. Guests who moments ago had been whispering now nodded, some even clapping softly. Margaret's composure cracked, her voice pitched higher, brittle with desperation. "She's bluffing. She can't be who she says she island. Someone like her, someone dressed like that, couldn't possibly—" She broke off, unable to finish, the venom in her words exposed. Elise didn't reply. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was heavier than any rebuttal. It pressed down on Margaret, on her smirk, on every cruel syllable she had thrown into the room. The gala had begun as a celebration of politics. Now it was something else entirely. It was Judgment Day, and Elise Carter hadn't even raised her voice. The silence stretched, broken only by the click of a camera shutter. Flashbulbs flared from the press pit, catching Margaret's flushed face and Elise's calm stance side-by-side contrast immortalized. What had begun as a social slight was mutating into a headline, a scandal, a reckoning. From the back of the ballroom, a young staffer in a simple suit whispered to his colleague, "They're still filming. This is already viral." His phone buzzed seconds later. A text alert. Trending #1. White House Gala incident. The story had already escaped the room. Margaret, sensing control slipping through her fingers, lifted her chin, and snapped, "She is nothing but a pretender. Don't let her fool you with silence." She turned sharply toward the journalists. "Turn those cameras off. This is a private event." But no one lowered their lens. If anything, more phones came up. The audience wasn't obeying her authority, they were obeying their conscience. Elise finally moved again, unfolding her arms and letting them rest at her sides. Her presence filled the space without theatrics. She looked out at the crowd, then back to Margaret. "Private? You made this public the moment you shouted. Every insult, every command, every doubt, you broadcasted it yourself." The room exhaled as if someone had cracked a window. A murmur of agreement rolled across tables. One congressman leaned into his mic, whispering to a colleague, "She's dismantling her without raising her tone." The guard, who had first tried to escort Elise, now stepped back fully, retreating toward the wall. His silence was his protest. Guests noticed, and with every inch he withdrew, Margaret's isolation grew sharper. At the far left of the ballroom, a college-age intern who had been serving wine finally spoke up. Her voice trembled, but it carried. "I saw her name on the guest list. Elise Carter. She belongs here." The ripple was instant. Whispers turned to stares, stares turned to nods, a truth too solid to ignore. Margaret spun on her heel, eyes blazing. "Who are you to speak? Your staff!" she snapped, venom dripping. But the damage was done. The intern's courage had cracked the facade, and everyone felt it. Elise didn't move to protect the girl. She didn't need to. Instead, she raised her gaze to the chandelier above, then lowered it back to Margaret. "You mistake youth for insignificance. You mistake silence for absence. But every witness here knows the truth, and it will follow you." A journalist's voice rang out, louder than before. "We are streaming to 200,000 live viewers. Mrs. Whitfield, do you want to double down?" The question sliced through what little power Margaret thought she had left. Her mouth opened, then shut, her eyes flickering like a candle fighting wind. Elise let the pause stretch. Then, with deliberate calm, she said, "The problem isn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is how you treated someone you thought was nobody." The words landed like a verdict. Chairs creaked as guests shifted, ashamed. A smattering of applause grew louder, breaking through the tension. The balance of the room had tipped, and everyone knew it. Margaret's pearl necklace shook as her chest rose and fell. She had lost the crowd, lost the guard, lost the story. But she didn't yet know how much more she was about to lose. Elise Carter hadn't revealed her hand. Not yet. The storm was still building, and when it broke, it would sweep away more than Margaret's pride. The applause didn't last long. It fractured into whispers, then into a hush as Margaret slammed her hand on the nearest table, rattling glasses of champagne. "Enough of this circus," she barked. "She's a fraud. Security, get her out before she embarrasses this entire institution." But no one moved. The guard who had once hovered at Elise's shoulder now stood firmly against the wall, arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the floor. He wasn't going to touch her again. The absence of his compliance was louder than any outburst. Margaret's voice sharpened with desperation. "Do you think silence proves anything? Do you think standing there makes you powerful?" She turned to the guests around her, pleading. "Look at her. New pedigree, new decorum, new proof." Across the ballroom, a senator's aide leaned to his boss and whispered, "Proof? All she has to do is speak." The senator shook his head slowly. "Number she doesn't. They've already condemned themselves." The live stream count ticked upward 300,000, then 4. Comments scrolled faster than the journalists could read them. "This is racism in pearls. She's handling this like a queen. Don't touch her. Let her speak." Finally, Elise's voice returned, steady as marble. "You want proof? The only proof this room needs is the mirror you refuse to face." She let the silence fill in the rest. People shifted in their chairs, some unable to meet her gaze. Margaret laughed, brittle and forced. "Mirror, don't talk in riddles. Say who you are. Show your credentials. Prove you belong." Her hand shook as she pointed toward Elise. "Or admit this is all a charade." From the press pit, a reporter shouted back, "She doesn't have to prove anything to you. Not after the way you treated her." The words triggered a ripple of applause. Phones angled higher, recording every flicker of the billionaire's wife unraveling. Margaret's face flushed crimson. "You're all being manipulated," she spat. "She's a nobody who knows how to play quiet. That's all. Don't let her trick you." Elise inhaled slowly, her eyes steady, her presence unshaken. Your fear is louder than my silence, and tonight, it's writing its own record. The young intern who had spoken earlier raised her phone again, voice trembling but defiant. I'm still streaming. Millions will see this. Every word, every insult, every order to have her removed. She glanced at Elise, then back to the crowd. You can't erase this anymore. Guests murmured, some nodding, some pulling their own phones higher. The weight of witnesses had shifted. Margaret's commands no longer held authority. They only revealed her panic. Elise folded her arms again, calm, waiting. The ballroom's air was thick with something new anticipation. They all knew the balance was tilting. They just didn't know how far it would tip, or how devastating the fall would be. Margaret tried one final thrust. She raised her voice, sharp enough to carry over the murmurs. If you won't leave, then I'll leave. And I'll make sure every guest here remembers you as the con artist who dared to step into a White House gala uninvited. She turned, pearls clattering as she jerked toward the exit, but no one followed. No one stood to escort her. Instead, eyes turned back to Elise, waiting hungry for what she would do next. The billionaire's wife had tried to claim the last word, but Elise Carter had not even begun to speak her truth. Margaret's heels struck the marble like a gavel as she stormed toward the exit, but her words still hung in the air. Con artist, doesn't belong, fraud. The sting of them lingered, echoing off the chandeliers. The crowd's eyes followed her, but not in support. It was the stare reserved for someone who had gone too far and didn't realize it yet. Then came the breaking point. A voice, clear and certain, cut through the silence. She's not the fraud here. The words came from a congressman seated near the center table, his silver hair gleaming under the light. He rose slowly, deliberately, and the room seemed to rise with him. The fraud is pretending that money excuses arrogance, that influence justifies prejudice. His eyes swept the crowd before landing squarely on Margaret's back. And we've all just witnessed it. The room erupted in whispers. Some guests clapped, cautious at first, then louder, until it built into a wave. Margaret froze mid-stride. She turned, her face pale beneath layers of makeup, pearls rattling as her hands trembled. You're siding with her? But the congressman didn't answer. He didn't need to. The weight of the room already had. Margaret's desperation curdled into rage. Enough! She screamed. She's nothing! She doesn't belong at this table, in this room, in this White House. Her voice cracked, shrill, and in its fracture came her undoing. The live feeds caught it all, her words, her venom, her unraveling composure. And then it happened. Elise finally moved. She reached into the small clutch at her side, pulled out her phone, and with a single tap, held it to her ear. The ballroom leaned forward. Her voice was calm, low, but every syllable carried like thunder. Initiate protocol. On the other end, her assistant's voice was crisp, immediate. Confirmed, ma'am. 6 billion withdrawn. Effective now. The collective gasp shook the ballroom. Margaret's mouth fell open. Guests covered theirs with trembling hands. The journalists nearly fell over themselves to capture every second. Elise lifted her gaze, fixing it on Margaret. You told me I don't belong. You tried to erase me with your voice. But you just erased your husband's campaign with mine. The words hit harder than any shout. Phones buzzed with alerts as newsrooms received simultaneous notices. Carter Foundation pulls $6 billion in funding. Headlines exploded in real time. Margaret stumbled, clutching at a chair for balance. You can't, you wouldn't. But the confirmation already echoed through the crowd. A senator whispered fiercely into his aide's ear. A lobbyist nearly dropped his glass of wine. Even the staffers in white gloves paused, stunned, as though the marble beneath their feet had shifted. Elise stood rooted, calm as stone. Your insult wasn't just cruel, she said evenly. It was costly. Margaret's face drained of color, her confidence collapsing into panic. Around her, the guests no longer looked at Elise with suspicion. They looked with awe, some with shame, others with relief. The balance had not only shifted, it had toppled. The live stream viewer count surged past 1 million. Comments flooded. She owns the night. This is justice. 6 billion in silence. And through it all, Elise Carter stood perfectly still, her silence louder than any scream, her power undeniable, her reckoning only just begun. The ballroom was no longer a ballroom. It was a courtroom, and the verdict had already been delivered. Phones buzzed with breaking news alerts. Carter Foundation withdraws $6 billion from campaign. The ticker crawled across live networks within minutes. Senators, donors, and lobbyists scrolled in disbelief while still standing in the same room. Margaret staggered backward, her pearl necklace trembling against her throat. This isn't possible," she stammered. Her voice, once so sharp, now wavered with fear. "You can't just take back money like that. You can't undo everything with a phone call." Elise didn't move closer. She didn't need to. Her words carried across the hushed room. "I built that money. I earned it. I decide where it flows. And it will never again flow toward anyone who thinks my existence is a mistake." The power in her tone made even the chandeliers seem to dim. For the first time that evening, Elise wasn't defending herself. She was sentencing them. A journalist's voice rang out from the press pit. "Miss Carter, can you confirm? $6 billion, completely gone from the campaign?" His phone was angled high, live streaming to millions. Elise gave the smallest nod. Confirmed. The gasp that followed was nearly physical, a wave of sound that rippled from one end of the ballroom to the other. A lobbyist clutched his chest as if his career had just crumbled. A senator muttered, "We can't recover from this." Margaret lunged forward, desperation replacing pride. "You'll destroy us all. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Elise's gaze sharpened, but her voice remained calm. "I know exactly what I've done. I've reminded you that power doesn't come from pearls or last names or old money. It comes from choices. And tonight, I chose to take mine back." The words hit with surgical precision. The live stream chat exploded. She ended them with one sentence. "That's power. This is history in real time." From the corner, the young intern who had first defended Elise lifted her phone higher, her voice trembling but steady enough to be heard. "You all tried to erase her, but now the whole world sees who really doesn't belong." The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement. Margaret's mask of control finally shattered. Her face twisted, her voice cracked. "You set this up. You came here to humiliate me." Elise shook her head slowly. "Number, I came here to celebrate. You chose humiliation all by yourself." The contrast was brutal, Margaret's hysteria against Elise's composure. The cameras didn't lie. Millions were watching a woman unravel while another stood anchored, unshaken. Then Elise added the line that sealed the night. "The real scandal isn't that you didn't know who I was. The real scandal is how you treated someone you thought didn't matter." The room broke. Applause thundered from corners that had once sat in silence. Guests rose to their feet. Some clapped out of admiration, others out of shame, but all because they knew the truth had landed. Margaret's last attempt to speak drowned under the sound. Her voice, once sharp enough to silence a room, was now nothing more than a whisper lost beneath the roar of justice. Elise Carter stood tall, silent once again. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She simply let the applause wash over her, knowing that silence had carried her further than fury ever could. The night had turned, and it was only the beginning. The applause surged, rolling through the ballroom like thunder, and then broke into a hush as Elise lifted a hand not commanding, just steady. The room quieted on instinct. Cameras zoomed in, live stream viewers leaned forward through their screen. She turned, not to Margaret this time, but to the entire assembly. "For months you toasted the generosity of a donor you never saw. You praised the money while ignoring the hands that built it. Tonight, you've shown the world what your gratitude really looks like." Her voice was calm, clear, without a hint of tremor. A senator shifted uneasily at his table. A billionaire donor rubbed his temple, sweat forming at his hairline. None of them dared to interrupt. Margaret stumbled forward, voice cracking. "You think you can stand here and humiliate me? My husband, he owns more than you can dream of." Elise's eyes didn't leave her. "Ownership isn't power if it depends on people like me funding it." She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "And I just ended it." Phones buzzed as push notifications confirmed the fallout. Campaign accounts frozen. $6 billion retracted. Major funding collapse, imminent. Journalists muttered into microphones, narrating history in real time. Margaret clutched at her pearls as if they could shield her. "This isn't the end. You'll regret this. Everyone will." Elise tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "The only people regretting tonight are the ones who believed silence meant weakness." The ballroom rippled with reaction, gasps, nods, even bursts of applause. The live stream counter surged past 2 million. Comments flooded. She's teaching them in real time. This is what dignity looks like. Pearls versus power, guess who won? And then Elise revealed the truth fully. "You want to know who I am?" she asked, her voice carrying like a verdict. "I am the founder of the Carter Foundation. I am the single largest donor to this campaign. And as of tonight, I am the woman who just pulled $6 billion from under your feet because you couldn't see past your prejudice." The words detonated in the air. Margaret's knees seemed to buckle, her hand gripping the back of a chair for balance. Gasps turned into outright shouts. Some guests clapped furiously. Others covered their faces in shame. The young intern stepped forward again, voice rising with conviction. "I told you she belonged here. I saw her name. I knew it. And now, the whole world does too." Elise turned to her, a small nod of recognition passing between them. It was quiet, but powerful in acknowledgement that truth needed witnesses. Margaret tried to speak again, but the words caught in her throat. All around her, faces turned cold. The congressman who had stood earlier spoke once more, his voice firm. "Mrs. Whitfield, I suggest you sit down. You've done enough damage." And she did. Shaking, she sank into a chair, no longer the queen of the gala, but a cautionary tale. Elise Carter remained standing, unbowed, every camera trained on her. "This gala was meant to celebrate power," she said, her voice steady as marble. "Tonight it revealed where true power lies. And it's not with those who shout the loudest, it's with those who cannot be erased." The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was seismic, the kind of sound that signaled a shift, not just in the room, but in history. The applause thundered, but beneath it was panic. Staffers huddled in corners, phones to their ears, whispering to campaign directors who were now learning the truth too late. Donors checked their watches, their investments flashing before their eyes. The White House ballroom had transformed into a scene of crisis. Margaret sat hunched in her chair, her pearls no longer a crown but a chain. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight, her earlier bravado shattered. Around her, the very people who once nodded at her jokes now shifted away, unwilling to be photographed in her shadow. The guard who had first touched Elise's shoulder stood straighter now, his voice breaking the silence. "Ma'am," he said quietly, almost reverently, "my apologies." He lowered his head, then stepped aside. His refusal to act earlier was now revealed as wisdom, not weakness. Guests murmured in disbelief as headlines flashed across their phones. "Major campaign collapse, Carter Foundation pulls record donation." What had started as humiliation for one woman had become humiliation for an entire political machine. And Elise? She remained motionless, anchored at the center of it all, her silence no longer defensive but commanding. Every camera lens locked onto her, every eye drawn to her presence. The storm she had endured was now a storm she controlled. The realization spread through the ballroom like wildfire. The insult had backfired, the tables had turned, and Elise Carter wasn't leaving in disgrace. She was standing as the undeniable center of gravity, while the rest scrambled to hold their footing. Elise finally broke the silence, her voice steady, deliberate. "Actions have consequences. Tonight, yours are permanent." She glanced toward Margaret, then beyond her, letting the words sink into every guest, every camera lens. Her phone buzzed once more. She answered without hesitation. "Yes," she said into the mic. "Finalize the withdrawal, notify every partner, and make sure the press release goes live in 5 minutes." A crisp reply came back, already underway. Gasps erupted as screens around the ballroom lit up with notifications. News outlets blasted the headline, $6 pulled from campaign Carter Foundation confirms. Senators slumped in their chairs. Donors buried their faces in their hands. Margaret shot to her feet, trembling. "You can't do this. You'll ruin everything, my husband. This campaign, the future." Elise's gaze cut her down like glass. You ruined it the moment you decided dignity was optional." The young intern stepped closer, her voice shaking but bold. "She's right. We all saw it, and we won't forget." The room erupted again, not in panic, but in applause. Louder this time, sharper. Guests rose, some defiantly clapping, others hesitantly joining in, but together forming a wall of sound. Margaret's cries were drowned beneath it, her authority shattered. And in that thunder of approval, Elise Carter stood unmoved, the quiet architect of justice, delivering punishment not with rage but with irreversible power. The applause swelled until it felt like the very chandeliers shook with it. Elise didn't raise her hands, didn't smile for the cameras. She only stood in stillness, letting the sound wash over her, a verdict rendered not by judges but by witnesses. When it finally softened, she spoke one last time, her words etched into the silence. I don't need a camera to prove what happened here tonight. I don't need to shout to be heard. I am the result, the final receipt of every slight, every insult, every dismissal. And the cost you just paid is $6 billion. Gasps turned into stunned silence. Even the journalists lowered their cameras, realizing they were capturing not just news but history. Margaret sank deeper into her chair, face pale, pearls hanging loose like chains around her neck. She didn't argue anymore. There was nothing left to defend. Elise glanced toward the exit, then back at the crowd. Remember this. Prejudice doesn't just wound, it bankrupts. Tonight you've seen it firsthand. With that, she turned, walking across the marble floor with the same quiet grace she had entered with. No entourage, no fanfare, only presence. Guests stepped aside instinctively, not out of fear but respect. Phones kept recording, but no one dared interrupt her. And as the doors closed behind her, the story was sealed. Elise Carter, the black CEO they tried to erase, had left not as a victim, but as the woman who redefined power in the White House ballroom.